I allow that you killed Malcolm X and that you were not helped by Norman Butler and Thomas Johnson?
I swear on it. I swear on it 1,000 times. I swear on it 1,000,000 times. I swear on it 1,000,000 times. They had nothing to do with this. Nothing at all.
Don't let her modesty fool you. This lady's the chairman of the board of a $100 million business, and she was the spirit behind the 3-year battle to turn Bill Lear's dream into this reality, a pusher-propeller turbojet that at 400 miles per hour gets 11 miles to the gallon. That's right, 11 miles to the gallon.
That last period of his life when he could still talk. Is that true that you leaned over to him and he said, "Mommy, finish it"?
Finish it. You bet it's true. I was putting my arms around him and he said, "Mom, be sure and finish it."
She runs the kind of post office everybody dreams about in a general store in Jonesville, Texas. She was selling stamps there in the good old days when they cost 3 cents. Now she's selling those 3-cent stamps for 20 cents.
And it will go higher. Part of the reason may be the obsolete facilities of the post office. Postal workers still go through the process of hand-sorting mail into pigeonhole racks like these, first designed, according to legend, by the first Postmaster General, Benjamin Franklin.
I'm Mike Wallace.
I'm Orly Safer.
I'm Harry Reasoner.
I'm Ed Bradley. Those stories and more tonight on 60 Minutes.
For murder. But 2 of those men may be innocent. The man who acknowledges that he committed the crime says the other 2 had nothing to do with it. The man who was murdered was one of the most charismatic figures of the civil rights movement of the 60s, shot down in New York City back in 1965. Who really killed him? Who killed Malcolm X? There were rumors at the time that he was a target of the white establishment, perhaps of the FBI, perhaps even the CIA. But the truth, it seems, was less sinister. Before long, it became apparent that he had been gunned down by the black Muslims. Why the black Muslims? Malcolm had had a falling out with the leader of the black Muslims, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, a man deeply revered by his disciples. Malcolm had committed the unforgivable sin of charging that his former leader, Elijah Muhammad, was an adulterer, that he had fathered children with several of his female assistants.
I talked with Malcolm about that back in 1964.
And how many of these illegitimate children did he father with the sisters?
Well, he made 6 sisters pregnant. They all had children. 2 of those 6 had 2 children. One of those 2 is having a child right now.
Malcolm was aware, even as he spoke, that what he was saying would cause him to be called a traitor by the black Muslims.
If someone came to me and I had no knowledge whatsoever of what had taken place, and they told me what I'm saying, I would kill them myself.
Are you not, perhaps, afraid of what might happen to you as a result of making these revelations?
Oh, yes. I probably am a dead man already.
6 months later, he was. And this is one of the men who killed him, Thomas Hagen, a New Jersey black Muslim sentenced to life in prison for murdering Malcolm X. Hagen admits to the murder and says he killed him because of what Malcolm was saying about his religious leader, Elijah Muhammad. But in addition to Hagen, 2 other black Muslims were arrested and charged with the killing. This is Norman Butler, a devout Muslim who has earned a college degree in prison. So far, he has spent 17 years of a life term in prison for killing Malcolm X.
Norman Butler, did you kill or help to kill Malcolm X?
Absolutely not.
Where were you on the day Malcolm was killed?
At home. I was at home.
And this is Thomas Johnson, also a practicing Muslim, also serving a life term for killing Malcolm X.
Did you play any part in the killing of Malcolm X?
None whatsoever.
You swear it?
I swear it, none whatsoever. If I was there, you was there, Harry Reasoner was there, and we all perpetrated this together. That's the cold facts.
But despite what Johnson and Butler say, the books remain closed in their case. And the question of their guilt or innocence would not even be raised now were it not for the sworn testimony of Thomas Hagen, the only one of the 3 who has admitted from the beginning that he took part in the killing. This is what he has to say about Butler and Johnson, the 2 men convicted with him.
These men are innocent. They're innocent. I cannot say why witnesses testified against them, but I can honestly say that it's not the first time that witnesses have lied against men. What has happened to these men is just as bad as what has happened to Malcolm.
The three have been serving time in 3 different prisons in the state of New York. 3 convicted assassins, with the one maintaining that the other 2 are innocent. But before we take a closer look at their story, more about the man whose murder put these men behind bars.
We declare our right on this earth to be a man, to be a human being, to be respected as a human being, to be given the rights of a human being in this society, on this earth, in this day, which we intend to bring into existence by any means necessary.
This was Malcolm X, the fiery evangelist for the black Muslims, the Nation of Islam. A militant, a man many feared could lead the black Muslims in violent revolt.
We are peaceful people. We are loving people. We love everybody who loves us. But we don't love anybody who doesn't love us. We're nonviolent with people who are nonviolent with us. But we are not nonviolent with anyone who is violent with us.
Toward the end of his life, Malcolm talked a good deal less of violence, and he had left the black Muslims to form his own organization. But on February 21st, 1965, he came here to the Audubon Ballroom in Upper Manhattan to address a group of those still faithful to him, his allies.
Malcolm had just been introduced, and he came on stage here, greeting the audience with the traditional Muslim phrase, Assalamu alaikum. Suddenly, an argument broke out several rows back in the audience. Malcolm urged the crowd to calm down, and his bodyguards moved toward the disturbance out there. It was then the shots rang out. Malcolm fell to the floor. In the chaos that followed, more shots were fired into Malcolm's body.
The only man arrested at the scene of the crime was Thomas Hagen. He virtually fell into the hands of police, who had to tear him from Malcolm's angry followers. Norman Butler and Thomas Johnson were not picked up as suspects until a week after the killing. Both were well-known Manhattan Muslims, both well-known enemies of Malcolm. As for Thomas Hagen,
you swear on Allah, by Allah, that you killed Malcolm X and that you were not helped by Norman Butler and Thomas Johnson.
I swear on it. I swear on it 1,000 times. I swear on it 1,000,000 times. I swear on it
They had nothing to do.
They had nothing to do with this. Nothing at all.
You have nothing to gain, really, from telling the truth now. Why are you talking about this?
Oh, I have something to gain.
What's that?
My self-dignity. My self-dignity. This is what I have to gain.
How do you mean, your self-dignity?
I got involved in this because of my beliefs, not because I'm a hired killer. I realize that I have made this mistake in my life, but I can't change what happened. But I can speak on what has happened to these 2 individuals.
well, if Hagen is right and Butler and Johnson are innocent, then who did help Hagen to kill Malcolm? Thomas Hagen has now submitted to New York authorities the names of 4 men who he says helped him kill Malcolm X. We have obtained their names. They were all members of the Newark, New Jersey mosque to which Hagen belonged back in 1965. At least 2 of those men still live in the New Jersey area. Hagen says he did not reveal those names previously simply to keep the Nation of Islam out of the case. But a New York Supreme Court judge has ruled that Hagen's story does not constitute new evidence. He says that the word of a confessed killer years after the fact is not enough to reopen the case. I spoke with Thomas Johnson at Dannemora Prison and reminded him he had expressed openly his hatred of Malcolm.
Did you ever think about killing Malcolm X, honest?
Yes. I would say this. I felt that he was worthy of it. I thought he was worthy of death for what he was doing. I don't know if I could actually carry it out. I've never murdered anybody.
The other man, Norman Butler, at Sing Sing Prison, says that he and Johnson were so well known that they would never have been allowed into the Audubon Ballroom by Malcolm's bodyguards. But I pointed out there were several eyewitnesses who testified in court that he and Thomas Johnson were involved in the shooting.
But I'm saying the eyewitnesses lied. And all of the people that spoke against me at the trial, among all of them, none of them knew me. Why didn't one of the people that knew me come to testify at the trial? If the people that were in that ballroom that knew me were convinced that I did it, the underground talk in the street would have said, so-and-so and so did it, because they know me. But the underground talk in the city didn't say that, because I wasn't there.
This man knew Butler and Johnson well. He is Benjamin Goodman, and he was Malcolm's chief assistant who introduced Malcolm X to the audience just moments before he was shot. And he agrees that Butler and Johnson could not have positioned themselves up front in the auditorium without Malcolm's security people noticing them. I talked with him at the Audubon Ballroom on the spot where Malcolm was shot.
All right, we had men on the door to watch for people who came in from number 7.
Number 7. That was the New York Black Muslim temple in which Johnson and Butler were members.
Anyone who came in from number 7 was supposed to have been stopped, and Malcolm or myself or James told that they were here. They could come in as long as we were informed that they were here from number 7.
How well did you know Norman Butler and Thomas Johnson then?
Very well.
By sight?
Yes.
To talk to?
Yes.
You're up here talking to the audience?
Yes.
Were they in the front row or the 3rd row or the 4th row?
No, absolutely not.
They were not there?
No.
You are certain of that?
Yes. Yes. You said they were sitting here, 2nd, 3rd, or 4th row?
Yes.
They weren't there.
Were they any place in this room that you knew?
No.
You would have recognized them?
Of course.
Well, these are the men who are in jail and have been in jail for killing Malcolm X for the last 17 years.
But they're innocent. They weren't here. They weren't sitting out here.
Well, wait. You were Malcolm's friend.
His assistant.
You knew these men?
Yes. They were not sitting out here. They are not the men that killed Malcolm.
Benjamin Goodman's story may be a case of too little too late, for he did not volunteer to testify at the trial 17 years ago. He says the bitterness between Malcolm's followers and Butler and Johnson scared him off. But neither was he called to testify by the defense lawyers.
No one else.
William Chance was Norman Butler's court-appointed lawyer, and he was convinced his client was innocent. I asked him if he had sought out Benjamin Goodman as a defense witness.
Benjamin Goodman, you know who he is?
No, I don't.
Benjamin Goodman was an assistant minister to Malcolm, and he's the fellow who introduced Malcolm that day. And he now swears that Norman Butler and Thomas Johnson, but Norman Butler, your client, was not in the Audubon Ballroom that day. Did you ever try to talk to Benjamin Goodman?
I do not recall whether I ever talked to Benjamin Goodman or not.
What effort, then, Mr. Chance, did you make to get this man off?
Well, I investigated his case, I interviewed him, and I cross-examined the witnesses at the trial.
It turns out that another important eyewitness was overlooked by the defense. Gene Roberts, an undercover police officer posing as a member of Malcolm's inner circle. He is pictured here giving Malcolm mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. He declined to talk to us on camera, and he wouldn't tell us whether he believes Butler and Johnson are guilty or innocent. But when we asked him why he hadn't testified at their trial, he simply said he hadn't been called to testify.
Did you try to talk to Gene Roberts on the stand?
I do not recall whether I ever talked to Gene Roberts or not, or who Gene Roberts is. I do not know who Gene Roberts is.
Isn't all of this material to an understanding? If you are defending a man on trial for his life...
That's correct.
And there's an undercover copper there in the room, wouldn't you want to talk to him? Wouldn't you want to talk to Benjamin Goodman, who had faced the audience?
If I knew, or if I had heard that was an undercover, had any information leading to the fact that he was there.
But still you believe that you gave him an adequate defense?
I know that I did. I know that I did.
You just couldn't persuade the jury?
Well, I didn't persuade the jury. Let's put it that way.
And Thomas Hagen also failed to persuade the jury, in spite of his testimony halfway through the trial in 1966 that Butler and Johnson were innocent. I asked him why he didn't speak the truth about Butler and Johnson and name his true accomplices earlier.
I think that we all felt that there would be no chances of any conviction for them at all in regards to this.
Why?
Of their innocence. I knew that they was not involved. They knew that they was not involved. And I think that they felt they had a tight defense. Really, you know, I felt that way right on up until, you know, at one point in the trial, it became obvious that, hey, you know, this thing is going in another direction. You're saying that the witnesses who testified in court lied. They definitely lied. Definitely lied.
But what about those eyewitnesses, the ones who convinced a jury 17 years ago that Johnson and Butler had taken part in the killing? 2 witnesses are dead. 2 others, both with criminal records, we've not been able to locate. But we were able to find 1 witness. In a courtroom that he asked be cleared of all spectators, this witness had sworn that Norman Butler was one of the men he saw running from the Audubon Ballroom here after the shooting. But that is not what he says today. The witness, who prefers not to be identified, declined to meet with us on camera. He said that he's afraid to get involved. But he does admit he did not actually see Norman Butler here at the scene of the assassination. And he now alleges the police lineup at which he identified Butler was contrived, a phony, a setup by members of the New York City Police Department. What about Thomas Johnson? This witness now says he knew Johnson well, and he's convinced Thomas Johnson was not here in the ballroom when Malcolm was killed. And finally, there is this.
Thomas Hagen has always maintained that his true accomplices were from the Newark, New Jersey Muslim mosque. But Norman Butler and Thomas Johnson were from Manhattan. We were able to locate several hundred pages of FBI surveillance material on Malcolm X with information about his murder. And among those documents was a communication which claimed that one of the Bureau's informants had indeed recognized 2 of the gunmen as being members of the Newark Temple.
And there is this from the American Muslim Mission, the present-day black Muslims. In a letter to us, Wallace Muhammad, their current leader, son of Elijah Muhammad, the man whom Malcolm had publicly accused as an adulterer, told us he has reason to believe that neither Norman Butler nor Thomas Johnson were the men who killed Malcolm X. But he declined to elaborate for us, either in his letter or on camera.
We received another letter from Manhattan DA Robert Morgenthau, who says the courts have given Butler and Johnson every chance to prove their innocence. And he says Benjamin Goodman, the man who introduced Malcolm moments before he was shot, did not tell the same story in 1965 that he is telling us now. However, DA Morgenthau declined to appear on camera to talk further about the case.
After all of this, one who spends time looking at the killing of Malcolm X is left with some puzzling questions. For instance, why was Benjamin Goodman, the man who introduced Malcolm X here, moments before he was shot, a man who knew both Johnson and Butler well, why was he never called to testify at their trial? Why was the defense never told there was a New York City undercover police officer present when the fatal shots were fired? And why was that police officer, an eyewitness, never called by prosecution lawyers who did know that he was in the ballroom? Finally, why the reluctance on behalf of authorities to follow up on Thomas Hagen's story? Why their reluctance to learn more about the 4 men he has named as his true accomplices in the murder of Malcolm X?